Shabbat Shalom. It's been a painful week for so many. Against the backdrop of surging COVID cases, wildfires, row fires, and punishing winter weather, we also marked the one-year anniversary of the January 6th attack on our Capitol. Reliving this moment broke our hearts all over again as we rewatched scenes of ferocious mobs storming the building, clashing with police, ransacking offices, rioters literally out for blood. The shock of seeing once more the barriers breached, windows smashed, and doors rammed open was as agonizing now as it was dreadful and appalling then. So many suffered deep, unremitting wounds as a result of this attack. And so many more carry the unbearable weight of this moment with them every single day. It is a day that irrevocably changed us and our nation, a day whose scars still feel raw, even 1 year hence. Jason Crow and Susan Wild, both congressional representatives who were at the Capitol on January 6th, share this testimony of survival. A year ago Thursday, along with dozens of our colleagues, we were trapped in the gallery above the House floor, making what we thought could be our final calls to our loved ones. We will never unhear the sound of a gunshot just outside the House chamber, the mob trying to break down the doors, or the fear in our loved ones' voices on the phone. Looking back on this horrific event, this stain upon our history, many of us are searching still for answers, for meaning, for understanding, and also for justice. The questions we had then about our collective identity, about our sense of national unity or disunity, as it were, about our future as a democracy, continue to roil within us. After January 6th, a day which left our nation more divided and more despairing than ever, many of us now wonder, where do we go from here? Well, perhaps Egypt is a good place to start. For that's where we find ourselves in this week's Torah portion, Parashat Bo, read earlier so beautifully by Rabbi Ehrlich. Recall that in Torah time, we are in the midst of the very familiar Passover story. God has already brought 7 plagues upon the Egyptians, and this portion details the final 3. But even as we are awed by God's marvels, we are consistently reminded of the purpose they serve: to set the Israelites free. This is a people who has endured unthinkable persecution and suffering on account of their religion, their culture. And so, whilst the plagues may dazzle, we cannot forget this community whose very existence is at stake should the plagues somehow fail. Moreover, even if the plagues succeed in securing the Israelites' freedom, which all of us have read to the end of the portion, and we know they do, we are still left with a people whose wounds of slavery remain. Freedom may be theirs, but freedom is not inevitable. How then do the Israelites summon the faith to believe in their own future? And how do they find the strength to walk that path of redemption paved by God? Well, some might say that Moses played an outsized role here. Others might say that the community shored up its strength to exercise its own agency. But our portion reveals that God played the largest role in empowering the Israelites, and not just by might or miracles. In fact, God uses the framework of time to gird the Israelite community. to help move them from slavery to freedom. By interjecting visions of the future into the present day, God enables the Israelites to see beyond their current circumstances, to imagine a life far different from what they've known. For example, as the Israelites are hurriedly making preparations to depart Egypt, procuring lambs, marking their doorposts, and awaiting the consequences of that horrific final plague, God then introduces the notion of the Passover commemoration, a commemoration of this very moment they are living out right now. God says, "This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time." And by introducing this vision of the future, a future that lifts up this very fraught moment in which they are living, God affirms to the Israelites, this day, this moment in which you are anxiously marking your doorposts, this day on which you might be cowering in your home as you await the conclusion of this plague, this day shall be to you one of remembrance. In other words, you will always remember this time of hardship and sorrow. You will always look back on this era of bondage. This past will forever be a part of your future. But in remembering this past, you will not mourn. Rather, this day shall be to you one of remembrance, and you shall celebrate it. The Israelites will remember this moment as one of triumph, not tragedy. Moreover, God adds, "For on this day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt." Remember, God is speaking to the Israelites before they've been redeemed, before they've been officially freed, and yet God speaks in the past tense. This is the day I brought you out. As they are living through this existential crisis, God simultaneously offers them a vision of a time beyond this moment, a future freed from this mentality of enslavement. And it is a future not limited to a decade or a century or even a millennium. It is for all time, a future that is boundless. With this brilliant approach of living in the present but envisioning the future, God sustains the Israelite people. At a moment when all very easily could have been lost, when all patience could have run out, and when all strength could have disintegrated into the dust. God understood that the people needed to see beyond the challenges plaguing them, beyond the circumstances constraining them, beyond the world of suffering they had known for so long. This tactic of living simultaneously in the present and the future is what allowed the Israelites to hope, to dream, and perhaps most importantly, to engage in their egress to freedom. Rav Yitzhak Greenberg, an esteemed Jewish scholar and author, teaches that this model of simultaneity is exactly how Jewish tradition asks us to live our lives. He explains that Judaism demands, first, that we live in our time. That is, we must bear witness to all that is happening around us, most especially the suffering and the sorrow and the heartache. But at the same time that we are to live in the moment, we are also commanded to see the future, to look beyond the present to a better, safer, more just, and compassionate time. For we are a people enlivened and ignited by hope. Rav Greenberg is quick to emphasize that hope for the future does not nullify our attention to the present. No, looking beyond today is not an excuse to dismiss what exists before us. It is not to pretend that suffering isn't happening all around us, nor is it a way to ignore our reality in exchange for some pie-in-the-sky ideal. Looking beyond allows us, rather, to dream and strive for a world that looks different from what we see today, to know that a better future exists, and to believe that humanity is capable of creating this better world if only we work for it and towards it. To quote Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, hope, not optimism, is what empowers us to take risks, to offer commitment, to give love, to bring new life into the world, to comfort the afflicted, to lift the fallen, to begin great undertakings, to live by our ideals. Jewish tradition reminds us again and again that even as we look out on a world that is often violent and destructive and immoral, a world that is full of corruption and distortion and hate, we are nevertheless obligated to hope, to dream, to believe that what we see before us is not all we are or all we can be. Indeed, we are so much more than what the insurrection of January 6th shows us to be, so much more than the outrage, the brutality, the baseness, and the cruelty. And though we may feel, as former President Jimmy Carter feels, that our great nation now teeters on the brink of a widening abyss, we cannot stand idly by, paralyzed by hopelessness or despair. No, we must strive, we must build, we must believe, and we must work towards the more righteous future we want to see. It is for us and upon us to complete this work. It is for us and upon us to initiate change. It is for us and upon us to create this world and our nation anew. Congressman Jamie Raskin, witness to January 6th, perhaps puts it best. My dad used to say, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. And so we must be. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Shabbat Shalom.